The city bus moved slowly through crowded streets, its tired engine humming beneath the noise of rushing traffic and tired passengers. In the very back seat sat a man in a worn blue uniform, his hands rough from years of cleaning floors that never stayed clean. He held his daughter's tiny hand as she leaned against his shoulder, her soft breathing warm and calm. To everyone else, he was invisible, just another janitor, another poor man trying to survive. But inside him lived a quiet strength built from years of sacrifice, heartbreak, and love. He had learned to stay silent, to endure, and to protect. That night, he had no idea that silence was about to be broken in a way that would change everything forever. Two men boarded the bus at the next stop, loud and careless, their eyes scanning the passengers like hunters searching for weakness. Their jackets were dark, their movements sharp, and the way they spoke low to each other made the air feel heavy. The janitor felt it immediately, that familiar instinct from a past he never spoke about. His shoulders stiffened slightly, but he remained calm, placing his daughter gently closer to the window. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to notice. Fear often looks like looking away, and the bus was full of fear that night. The two men walked toward the middle of the bus and stopped near a young woman sitting alone. The young woman's hands trembled as one of the men leaned in too close, whispering words no one else could hear. Her eyes darted around, silently begging for help that never came. The bus driver kept his eyes forward. The other passengers looked down at their phones or out the window. No one wanted trouble. No one wanted to get involved. But from the back of the bus, a small voice broke the heavy silence. "Daddy, please help her." The janitor's heart skipped. He looked down at his daughter and saw fear in her tiny eyes, but also courage. She saw injustice. She saw danger. And she believed her father could stop it. His daughter's words echoed louder in his heart than any command he had ever received. He had promised himself years ago to live quietly, to never draw attention, to never let the world know who he used to be. But how could he ignore her? How could he teach her bravery if he stayed seated? Slowly, carefully, he stood up. The bus seemed to fall silent as his worn boots touched the floor and he began walking forward. The two men noticed him approaching and laughed softly under their breath. To them, he was just a janitor. To the girl watching, he was her hero walking toward fear without hesitation. One of the men turned, smirking as he blocked the janitor's path. "This isn't your problem, old man," he said coldly. The janitor's eyes met his, and for a split second, something changed. His posture straightened. His breathing slowed. Years of training resurfaced like muscle memory awakened from deep sleep. He spoke calmly, his voice steady like steel. "Let her go," he said, not as a request, but as a warning. The bus felt smaller. The walls felt closer. The tension grew thicker than the air as everyone realized something serious was about to happen. The first man pushed him gently, testing him. The janitor didn't stagger. He didn't react. He simply waited, measuring distance, angles, timing, instincts that had once kept men alive in places far darker than this bus. The second man reached for the young woman's wrist, tightening his grip. Her soft whimper filled the bus. That was the breaking point. In one smooth movement, faster than anyone could understand, the janitor twisted the man's arm just enough to make him release her without causing lasting damage. It was controlled, professional, and terrifyingly precise. Gasps filled the bus's fear. Shifted direction, now belonging to the two men. The men stumbled backward in shock, their confidence shattered in seconds. "Who are you?" one of them whispered, his voice shaking. The janitor said nothing. He stepped between them and the young woman, creating a quiet barrier of protection. The bus driver finally looked in the mirror, his eyes wide. Passengers started recording, their phones trembling in their hands. The two men realized too late that they had chosen the wrong bus and the wrong man that night. But even as the tension peaked, none of them knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than a simple act of courage. Outside, sirens began to echo faintly in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. Someone had called for help. The bus came to an abrupt stop as flashing lights painted the windows red and blue. But instead of police officers, the doors opened to reveal a Navy escort vehicle blocking the road. A uniformed officer stepped inside the bus, scanning the faces quickly. Then his eyes landed on the janitor. In that moment, something unbelievable happened. His entire posture changed, and without thinking, he stood straighter and saluted. Not to the bus driver. Not to the passengers. But to the man in the worn janitor uniform. The entire bus froze. The two men looked confused. The passengers whispered. The young woman covered her mouth in shock. The janitor remained calm, though his eyes flickered briefly. The officer swallowed hard and spoke in a low, respectful tone. "Sir, the Navy commander is outside. He asked to see you personally." A wave of silence hit the bus. How could a Navy commander be asking for a janitor? How could this ordinary man be known to such high-ranking officials? But inside the janitor's heart, old memories flooded back, missions, sacrifices, fallen brothers, and a life he buried long ago. When he stepped off the bus, the cold night air hit his face like a reminder of who he used to be. Standing beside the Navy vehicle was a tall man in a decorated uniform, his face stern but filled with recognition. Their eyes met, and for a second, the world felt still. "I knew it was you," the Navy commander said quietly. "We've been looking for you." The janitor said nothing. His daughter stood behind him, holding his hand tightly, unaware that her father was once someone legends were written about. The passengers watched through the windows, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The commander turned to the bus passengers and spoke loudly. He explained that the man they called a janitor was once one of the most respected operatives in naval history, a hero who saved countless lives and disappeared after a classified mission. Gasps filled the air. Whispers of disbelief spread rapidly. The two men who had caused trouble lowered their eyes in shame, realizing they had almost faced a man trained to stop far worse than them. But for the janitor, none of it mattered. He looked only at his daughter, whose eyes shined with pride instead of fear. The young woman who had been saved stepped forward, tears rolling down her cheeks as she thanked him with shaking hands. The janitor gently nodded, offering a small smile, the kind only someone burdened by too much history can give. He didn't seek praise. He didn't want attention. He only wanted his daughter to know that helping others was never wrong, even when it costs comfort, safety, or anonymity. The Navy commander respected that silence. He saw in this man something rare, humility stronger than medals and courage quieter than explosions. The night felt heavy, sacred, and unforgettable. The commander asked him to return, to rejoin, to lead again. But the janitor gently said no. His war was over. His battle now was raising a child with love and teaching her the right way to walk through a broken world. The commander understood. He extended his hand, not as an officer, but as a brother. They shook hands without words. The bus driver wiped his eyes. The passengers lowered their cameras. The two men were taken away in silence. And slowly, life began to move again. But nothing inside that bus would ever feel ordinary again. The bus doors closed and the engine started once more, carrying souls who had witnessed something rare, real bravery. The janitor returned to his seat, and his daughter hugged him tightly around the waist. "I knew you would help," she whispered. He smiled softly and kissed her forehead. In that moment, he was not a soldier. Not a commander. Not a legend. He was just a father. And that was the only rank that truly mattered to him. Outside, the Navy commander watched the bus fade into the distance, saluting quietly, not for power, but for honor. Days passed, but the story spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with questions, but no one knew his name. No one could find his history. He went back to cleaning floors and emptying trash, walking through quiet hallways while echoes of his past lived only inside his heart. Some people tried to recognize him. Some tried to approach him. But he simply smiled and moved on. His daughter, however, began to see the world differently. She started helping others at school, standing up for classmates, speaking up when something felt wrong, just like that night on the bus. One evening, as the city slept, the janitor stood by his small apartment window and looked at the stars. He thought of friends he lost, promises he made, and the silence he chose. He wondered if he had done enough. If he had saved enough lives. If he deserved peace. Then he heard soft footsteps behind him. His daughter hugged him from behind and said, "You saved her, Daddy, just like you saved me." In that moment, he understood something deeper than war. Love was the greatest mission he had ever been given. The Navy commander, back at the base, could not forget what he witnessed. He ordered a silent honor added to old classified files, restoring the janitor's name without exposing his past. It wasn't for the world. It was for history. It was so one day, if his daughter ever wanted to know who her father truly was, the truth would not be lost. Even heroes deserve to be remembered, even if they choose to live as shadows. And somewhere in a quiet street, a man swept the floors of a school building, smiling to himself as children laughed around him. The two men from the bus faced justice, but what truly haunted them was not fear of prison, it was the fear of how small they felt in front of a man who didn't even try to hurt them. They had seen control, discipline, honor, and it changed them more than punishment ever could. One of them even wrote a letter from jail, thanking the unknown man for showing him what real strength looked like. The world sometimes changes not through violence, but through moments of silent power, perfectly controlled, perfectly timed. The young woman started volunteering for safety awareness and self-defense classes, inspired by that night. She often spoke about the stranger who saved her, hoping one day to find him and thank him properly. But she didn't know that sometimes heroes are not meant to be found. They are meant to exist quietly, like guardians in the background, watching, ready when needed. The janitor never told her his name. He never looked back. And yet his presence remained alive in her spirit, pushing her to be brave whenever fear tried to take over. One rainy afternoon, the janitor and his daughter rode the same bus again. The city looked the same, but it felt different. The driver smiled at him with respect. Some passengers nodded politely. Wordless understanding filled the air. The janitor held his daughter's hand and felt peace in his chest. Not the loud peace of victory, but the quiet peace of knowing he made the right choice. He did not need medals. He did not need recognition. He just needed to be there when his daughter's voice called him to do what was right. The rain tapped gently on the bus windows like soft applause from the sky. The janitor leaned back and finally allowed himself to feel proud, not of what he had done in the past, but of who he had become. A man who chose kindness over comfort, courage over silence, love over fear. His daughter rested her head on his shoulder, trusting him completely, unaware that she carried the heart of a hero inside her own fragile chest. The world moved forward, but inside that bus, something timeless had been born. Late that night, after putting his daughter to sleep, he sat alone in the dim light of their small home. He opened an old box hidden deep inside a closet. Inside lay a faded uniform, folded carefully, untouched for years. He placed his hand on it and whispered goodbye once more. He didn't need it now. His battlefield was different, his mission was clear, and his heart was finally light. Outside, the city slept peacefully, unaware that one of its quiet protectors walked its streets every single day without asking for anything in return. The Navy commander often thought about the janitor whenever he addressed young recruits. He spoke of honor as something that cannot be bought, courage that does not scream for attention, strength that shows itself only when truly needed. And somewhere, a group of young sailors listened, dreaming of becoming heroes. But the greatest hero among them all was mopping floors, buying groceries, walking his daughter to school with a gentle smile and tired, loving eyes. Life has strange ways of hiding its most powerful stories in the simplest of lives. Years later, his daughter would remember that night on the bus not as a moment of fear, but as the night she saw what love truly meant. She would grow up brave, kind, and strong, carrying her father's quiet teachings inside her heart. And whenever she faced fear, she remembered his steady walk down the bus aisle, his calm voice, and the way he never hesitated when she asked him to help. That memory became her shield, her light, and her path forward in a world that often looked away. The janitor aged slowly, his back bending slightly with time, but his spirit never weakened. He never told his story. He never wore his medals. He lived as he chose, simple, honest, and invisible. But invisibility is not weakness. Sometimes it is the greatest form of strength. Caring without reward, protecting without praise, loving without limits. The world may never know his name, but it felt his impact in countless small ways, like ripples spreading quietly across water long after the stone was thrown. And so the bus kept moving through the city, night after night, carrying strangers, fears, and quiet miracles. Somewhere in the back seat, a single dad janitor sat holding his daughter's hand, ready to stand again if he ever needed to. Not because of rank, not because of past glory, but because love had taught him that the bravest people are not the loudest, they are the ones who rise quietly when someone whispers, "Please help her." And in that quiet moment, he would always answer the call.